everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 252, How to Decide If You Have a Viable Idea. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while because I've been talking with clients about what you do when you have a whole bunch of ideas. Some of them seem bigger than others. Some of them seem part of, maybe one idea seems part of a bigger idea. And you need to think about what outputs these ideas can go to. So one of the things that I talk through is looking at viability. And for me, there's really 4 factors to decide, is this idea that I'm pursuing something that could actually be a publication on its own? Obviously, scope matters. So if it's a big idea, maybe it's something worthy of a book or, something like a large scale project. But other ideas, they're too tiny to even make a scholarly article. They might be great for a conference presentation, but they're not big enough to be a scholarly article or a book chapter. So here are 4 ways to look at your idea and decide if it's viable. These are also helpful, I think, to decide if you have an idea that might need to move to maybe combine with another idea. So maybe this is something that will show you it's too small, but it will also show you if it's too big. So one of the things that you want to look at is if you can execute your idea or the project that your idea will make with resources you already have. So for example, if you need to look at archival material to be able to write about your idea and publish it in a scholarly journal, can you get that archival material? Is this something that you could complete in a reasonable time frame? So for many projects, you could totally do it, but you need 5 years, but you may not have 5 years. So if you're on the tenure clock or, just in general, you're not going to be excited about this idea in a couple of years. Maybe it means right now you can't execute it with your resources. Another way that you might think about resources is time. So one of the things to look at for faculty that are interested in writing a book or doing a textbook or a really large project is to look at, can you sustain that? Can you figure that out with the time that you have available? It takes a long time to write a book. I actually did do in the last couple of years. And it's something where you have to look at all the resources, not just, maybe software you need to run a specific experiment, but also, do you have the time to pull it off? So one of the things is, okay, I have this idea. If I would do the research needed to make this a viable idea, could I pull it off with resources? That includes, of course, time, any kind of software you need, anything that you need to do it. So if the answer is yes, that's one sign it might be a viable idea. Another thing to look at would be, does it fit with a target journal, or I should say target outlet, and possibly a backup? So you might have this really great idea and you might find out that nobody wants it. This has actually happened to me. I've talked about it on this podcast. So one of the things that happened to me, one of my very first experiences with submitting a book proposal was I had this great idea for a book. And what I came to find out was that, yeah, it's a great idea, but it's not, the target place doesn't want it. And it's not that they don't think it's a good idea. They just don't think the audience is big enough. So one of the things I had to think about was fit for that topic. And so what it ended up fitting in, and I think I've talked about this somewhere on this podcast, but I ended up carving that book up into a couple of articles that fit with a really good target journal. I didn't even need a backup. So what you might want to think about is, if you're going to publish something in a journal, maybe looking at some recent issues. What are they publishing on? So maybe, 10 years ago when you read a specific journal, they were talking about this one topic, and your project, your new idea, your viable idea would have been great. But right now, they're not doing that anymore, or they're overrun with articles about it. So for example, one of the things that we're seeing clients come in with is a lot of publication on AI. And what they're starting to find is that some journals are just burned out on publishing on AI because they've been publishing about it now for over a year. And it's not that that's not an important topic, but if you're not bringing something new to the table, it might not be a viable idea. So you might check out if you've got a place to put it, and a backup place to put it is another sign of viability. So if you can pull it off, that was number 1. And you can, number 2, find a spot that will actually want it. That's another sign that it's viable. Another thing to think about would be fitting in a different way. So thinking through your expertise and your positioning. So this is kind of the same thing, but a little bit different. Which idea plays to strength and knowledge base? So what are some things that kind of figure out where you are in your discipline? So for example, you might have this great idea and you might find a journal that wants it and the fit is okay. But one of the things you have to think about is the other kind of fit, which is how does it fit into your scholarly agenda or your research expertise? So if you're somebody in your early career and you're trying to build a body of knowledge, maybe this idea is just too far afield from the knowledge base that you're trying to create. That's not to say that you can't pivot. So my early work was a lot with computers, composition, and writing, and specifically looking at feminist digital writing. However, I don't do that anymore. I work all with faculty writing productivity, scholarly writing productivity, and that's what I've been working on for the last 15, 20 years. So one of the things to think through is how does it fit with that, with your positioning? Another thing to look at would be impact. Do you have some place that this idea will appeal to, not just the journal, but also some readers? Who might be your potential audience for that particular idea? Does that idea have impact in a way that not only will a journal want it, but it might circulate? So how you kind of know an idea would be viable is if you can identify this stuff pretty easily. If you can't figure out who wants to read about this idea, it might not be an idea yet. It might be too small. It might need to be developed more, or it might be too broad and it's not distinct enough. So you can't figure out well, why would this idea make a big impact on my discipline or on a field or in a specific venue? So another way to kind of think through would be, what are things that people are talking about at conferences? So if you've been going back to conferences, either live or online, if you look at some of these discussions, sometimes if you hear this idea is something that might be discussed at the conference, or it might be something of interest to people there, that might be another sign that it's viable. Conferences often are a space where ideas that aren't fully fleshed out yet get some play. So they're talked about by the audience. You might be testing out part of your research. And of course, you might be presenting on past research that you've already done, you've already published, but sometimes it's the other way around where you test some things out. So one of the things to think through, and a good way to kind of test if you have an idea, is to talk to people about it. So other colleagues in the field, think about who might actually read an article about this. In a book I did in 2018 called How Writing Faculty Write, there is an interview in there with Jessica Enoch. And one of the things that she does is she does something called thinking rhetorically. And she really thinks about okay, who might actually read this work, like a specific person in the discipline? So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. There's a spot where you can check that out if you want to, but I think it's a good question because if you can't identify a real reader, that might mean that idea is not viable this time, or at least not yet. Finally, as we close out, those were 4 ideas about being viable scholarship to decide if you have it or not. You can also talk about it with us. So it is that time of year again when we're recording this at the end of October in 2025, where we are now launched into our holiday coaching special, where all of our writing coaching hours are at the lowest price of the year. Right now, if you do them, there's lots of bulk discounts. You buy 11, you get 1 free. You buy 15, you get 3 free. And buy 20, you get 5 free. And they're all at the cheapest price that they will be for the whole year. So if you've thought about writing coaching at all and you want to test your viability with your ideas, or do some accountability coaching, work through some writing blocks. If you've got a publication you just have to get out the door, good way to do it. Also, people can gift these to you. So if that's something that you're looking at for a holiday present and you want to pass that on, anyone can email me at Christine@Defend, Publish, and Lead. Happy writing this week, and may you have viable ideas.